Well, now we're going to do more conference and presentations. And the first presentation is Gemma Pignot, and she is the head of migration and mobility policies at Intersectionality and Think to Do firm, and an associate researcher in Pompeu Fabra University. She's also a member of the advisory board at the Intercultural Cities Council of Europe, and she's the coordinator of RECI, which is the Spanish network of intercultural cities. She's also a lecturer in some Catalonia universities, at Autonomous University and Pompeu Fabra University.
Gemma is a cat lover and with a beer in hand could talk about why they are the best endlessly.
Thank you, all of you, for being here. I have to say that they say me that this is going to be the boring session. Why? Because I'm going to talk about concepts. So, what that means is that after lunch, raining outside, it's maybe not the best moment for a boring session. So I'm going to ask you, please, to participate in order to try to break this kind of horrible, horrible session that we are going to face, okay? So it's on you, it's not on me, eh? This is the first idea. So what we want to talk about today, it's about concepts, about these ideas that we are talking. I think that you are, maybe I'm saying something, but you are not too close. Maybe you can expand and sit whatever you want. Are you comfortable? Because it's, I see a lot of people all together here, like and here it's people, it's alone. Okay, it's up to you to move, but meaning feel free to move, because this is the idea that you can talk and participate. So, you have been working in a project, no? You are the ambassadors and you are talking about fighting hate speech and trying to fight against discrimination in general, yeah? So the idea that I want to talk a bit is where we put all these elements in terms of public policies or in terms of public management, okay? Because at the end, this is not something that we want to do because we are super nice. That we are super nice, for sure. It's something that we want to do because this is something that in democratic societies we need to do, okay? Fighting against discrimination is like a mandate that we need to face. So how we are going to do that, and which are the elements of how policymakers decide things, I think it's important that you have a bit clue about that. What I'm going to talk about, it's something that is open to discussion. It's important that you understand that critical thinking means that although I'm trying to sell you the idea of interculturality, you can discuss, and please do it, because it's through the process of thinking together that we can reach consensus, okay? It's not that I'm going to sell you the topics and it's like, go home and this is the truth. No, it's open to discussion, okay? And in fact, please discuss. Because this is part of you have been learning, no? And you have been talking about that. So this is the idea. First question. When I ask you, how many of you have heard about intersectionality? 3 people, 4 people, okay? And about interculturalism? So it's a bit more, it's like, okay. So, the question, the big question. This is why the people never stand up, because the second question is, how do you going to describe interculturalism or intersectionalism according to your ideas? How you can explain that, for instance, to your family members, whatever?
I think that interculturality means that a lot of different cultures live together in a space and they appreciate each other's cultures.
Okay.
And intersectionality is being aware that there is a system of discriminations, and we don't have to think like one person is experiencing just one discrimination at once, but every person lives in a society where we can be discriminated for different features we have, and yeah, intersectionality means that we must be aware of this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add for interculturalism that for me it's not only that people, different cultures living together and appreciate each other, but that they are interacting and creating something together.
I think that I'm going to leave because it's like you have all the answers, correct?
Thank you. For me, as she mentioned before, intercultural society is kind of like you have multicultural, that you have the ingredients to make a cake, and then you have intercultural, that is the cake. So everybody together is making something bigger that is not just the sum of the different action. And intersectionality is that you are moving through these different sections, so nothing is just locked down, but everything is interconnected, and you talk and you take from the other.
Okay. One question, and then you.
I thought of the intercultural space station, where a lot of different countries work together to make the space station.
Okay, first, just to start thinking, and I'm going to give you the micro, don't worry. Questions that have been put in the table, identities. And we are going to talk about that, what identity means. And then the idea to mix, for instance, as you say, as the example of the intercultural space station, when we talk about cultures, but we say nationalities. Okay? That it's also a point.
Well, for interculturalism, like someone over there already said, I think a key word is coexistence, not just living next to each other, but intertwining with each other and interacting. And I think a good example of this is our Fondo neighborhood, where there's a lot of cultures coexisting and intertwining with each other, and just interaction is a key element of interculturalism.
As I know that you are from a Spanish background, when you say coexistence, you mean convivencia? Yeah, because we are also talking about the limits of the language, because it's not the same coexistence that convivencia, and this is something that we're also going to talk about.
Okay, so when I think about interculturality, I always think about the terms salad bowl or mixing pot, and I think more like of a mixing pot where lots of various cultures they don't just live together like the other said. I agree it's about meeting and influencing each other, and primarily about taking up the positive aspects of the other cultures and creating like a big new community. Yeah.
One thing I'd like to add is the moral compass of that intercultural society, because you have to agree on one of a few moral rules that the society has to follow in order, that's only my interpretation, in order to be really productive.
Productivity, moral concepts. So, more comments? No? Okay.
Intercultural, well, that's a concept that we learned the first classes here on the project, the FASTLISA, but I don't remember the definition or official definition that we see on the group. But for me, intercultural, it's a more cultural, it's more cities, culturals, all mixes and share another different cultures into many people.
Okay, it's super interesting. I don't know if you noticed that you have been emphasizing a lot the idea of people interacting, people having this idea of try to reach consensus or try to live together, no? In this idea of, and at the same time we also use the idea of culture. And cultural identities are super complex to define. Do you think that we have the same idea in our minds when you say culture? When I say culture, what appears to your mind? You can shout if you want.
I think of countries, nationalities, and also groups of people, because not one country can have a lot of different cultures. I think about different topics like food or behavioral patterns and just the way they do things.
For me, a culture describes the uniqueness of each nation, so it's not about the nation in fact, but it's about the things that make it significant, like Septi just said, food, but for me especially behavior, and how you behave, for example, at the table with family, and just manners, yeah.
So can we say that culture is also social norms that we are imposing? Because as you say, it seems social behaviors, no?
I wanted to say...
If you can, because if not, I'm going to...
Sorry.
I can die,
Culture can also be music, art, or clothes.
And I would say we don't have only one culture. For example, I have a family culture, I have my study culture, I have my dance culture, I have my national culture, I have my county culture, so everything.
So in fact, as we are saying... I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, oops. I'm sorry because I didn't...
It's not a problem. So the first thing that came up to my mind was about culture, history. So I thought about history of a country, so the costumes, the food, but also when she said about the family, so the history of the family, and so is the history of a country.
No, it's interesting, the mix and the individual and the national.
And for me, culture is something that is changing all the time, that is related to the historical context and the things that are happening also from the environment, because you start with a culture that is not yours, but is belonging to someone else, that is bringing your place and is acting in the situation and is changing through the situation.
Okay, it's super interesting because I opened a question that's about what culture is. I'm not going to answer that. There is a lot of people studying that, and there is a super complex dissertations about the difficulty of defining culture. But what it's interesting to see is that we sometimes use words that means different things from everyone, okay? And sometimes when we use culture, we are talking about nationalities without saying, because we don't want to talk about nationalities. Or when we say culture, we are talking about religions, but we don't want to say it because we don't want to talk about religions, okay? So I'm saying that because it's interesting to understand the difficulties of understanding what we are saying, because sometimes we use the concepts in order to don't say another things, or we use in a different way, okay? The idea, for instance, that culture is a transformation process, it's super interesting, and it's for sure open, but if you say that to a lot of people today, that nativist perspective, that are defending the idea of the traditional culture as something that it's an identity for them, could be shocking, okay? So why I'm saying that? Because what we are going to talk this time is about these difficulties, about understanding concepts that are born in different situations and for different reasons. And in fact, what I'm going to explain about interculturality, because I'm going to talk about interculturality mainly, it's the intersectional journey of interculturality, okay? Why? Because I think that I can move to the presentation. This, for me, is something that you need to understand. When we talk about identities, when we talk about processes of understanding who we are not doing that in a general or in a vacuum, okay? We are doing that in a wall, which is, since the 17th century, mainly based in the role of the states, okay? And you are going to say, and what? What I care about that. It's important to understand that the idea of a national identity has born with the idea of a state. It's clear, no, that? So we need to have a common element. So when we talk about integration policies or when we talk about living together, the first idea that happens is living together who? Between people that are us and who are us. How we build this us that we are. It's clear what I'm trying to say? Or no? Or it's confusing? It's confusing? It's clear? No, I don't know. If you don't react, yeah.
what you're implying is that as a national, as a nationality, you need to have certain goals for the whole nationality?
No. In fact, what I'm saying is that states were born in a situation, in a context, in a world that we can make a history, and then we create the goals to justify that we are a state. What I'm trying to say is that there is nothing that is a national community if there is no state. So what we decide is that because we have states, we need to give these states an identity, to differ ones from others. It's clear? This is how the political system works. It's not something that we decide. It's like we grow up in a context in which we understand that we are like all the other nationals in our country. Because this is how it has been told the history. But it's true? This is another question. Yeah, because it's clear what I'm trying to say, that sometimes is what we're saying, and this is important to understand that, sorry, yeah.
If I'm understanding right, you are asking if it's they are trying to make us think that just because, for example, I'm Spanish, I'm like other Spanish people. Like you are talking about the sentiment of nationalism. I don't know.
Meaning, you could understand like that. The idea is that I was not asking, I was saying that the states was created in order to control territory and in order to control a population. In order to do that, you need to generate like a common narrative. Yeah, it's true. And in this narrative, you are part of the group and the others are part of the other groups. Yeah? And this is what happens when we talk about this idea of communities. National communities are like this imagined community in which we share a lot of things. Because it's true, we share a lot of things. The idea is that we share a lot of things with a lot of people in the world, but in this case, we share territory at least.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because I never thought of this aspect. It keeps a country together, it builds a community, and it also helps the government to give the people a sense of security, and that's just very beneficial for the country.
It's beneficial for the country, it's easy to manage people, and then it's also a way to join efforts, no? In order to, we're going to be an increase and be better all together, okay? So this is the idea. We have a territory that the state controls, a population, and this idea of severity, this idea of all common. It's clear that? So, this is why it's important to know how we create these questions about integration. Because, and this is when I'm going to start to talk a bit about interculturality. The idea is when you are talking about who is part of the state, or who is part of a community, a national community, you are always thinking about the majorities and minority groups. It's true? For instance, in your countries, and we are now going to be very static, then we are going to move against that. But the idea is, in your countries, can you think about minorities or specific groups that are always the ones that are not integrated in the society? That they are in the country but are not part of the whole society? Can you think about? Wow.
I think you have to look at the country itself, because there's so much different countries. There are like Muslim countries who do not accept people who have like another sexuality. There are people in Germany as well who are like, was sagt man behindert auf Englisch? Behindert auf Englisch?
Disabled, yeah.
Yeah, who are, yeah, handicapped.
People with disabilities is the correct.
Disability, yes. And they are in the country, but they are also not in the community.
That's bad. So it's super interesting. First, we have talked about sexual orientation, and also with people that has some kind of physical more. Think in your country. Think about people, communities, groups that you think that are not included in the general us of the society. Sorry.
In Italy, I think Rome people, because I saw many of them, for example, in Ravenna, that lives outside of the city, and they also, the kids, play with themselves and not with other kids.
Shamefully, for most of the EU countries, Roma population, it's one of the otherness in the community.
Well, I think the most vulnerable group of people right now is immigrants, because many people have to flee their countries because of wars or climate change, or because of the country is poor, and they are not accepted in other countries who maybe have the money or the space to accommodate them.
Okay, so I didn't think of a marginalized group or a group like a cultural group, but I thought about like people who live in poverty, like poor people. You know they exist and they're there, but I think like we eliminated a little bit from the reality, and I think like in every not in every country, but in most of the countries, they're like the group who are not recognized a lot and who are not like a big part of the whole community and society.
Okay, so again, nationality and income. At the end, this is what we are talking. It's super important. So what I'm trying to say is that in the traditional systems, we always have this kind of exclusion groups for different reasons. We have been talking about some of them. And this can be managed in terms of public management from different points of view. Okay? You can decide that you have people that live in a disadvantaged situation. We don't put anything here, disadvantage in general. And you can decide that this is okay for you. You are going to create this segregation system in which people who has not fulfilled the list of checks that are required to be part of the us. It's something that you are okay with, okay? This is the segregation model or the exclusionary model, and then other models that try to create the idea that we need to rethink the us, okay? That us is more broader that we have been talking about during all our lives, okay? And this is why I say that the intercultural approach has born with a very specific target that has been changing during the years. And the idea is that when the intercultural model was born, and I'm going to show you where it's coming from, it was to answer about two main groups. It was minority groups in the States and non-national, okay? This was the idea, to try to create public policies that opens the idea of public management, that the idea of living together in a diverse society to all the diversities that there are in a city. Mainly focusing this idea of minority and non-national groups, okay? What happens? That when you start to work with people, as some of you have said before, you understand that people has not only one identity, or it's not only one element that can generate a situation of inequality. It's true. There is a lot of things that can be mixed in the same moment, okay? So this, the idea of the intercultural approach is the idea of how we try to create public policies that are useful for every one of the citizens of territory. Yeah, it's clear what I'm trying to say. The idea is that sometimes, and this is something that it's, where we are talking about interculturalism, is something that we are facing in terms of it's not easy. Meaning what I'm saying is super easy to understand. It's like all of us, from our differences, we need to be treated equally and have the same level of rights, duties, and opportunities. Yeah? We share that, no? At minimum, we share that. And it's super nice that I can say that and say, okay, and we live. But then we need to do that in all the things that we do as individuals, but also as members of a community. And how we do that is the big question. I'm not going to answer the big questions for you today, because the idea today is open more questions than solutions, but this is the main goal, or maybe the main challenge that we are facing. We are coming, and this is for me important that you understand where we are coming from. Why we decide that we need to think differently, that it's what I'm going to say that intercultural approach is about, is think differently, is because we come from a very traditional models of understanding who is part of a community, okay? Have you ever heard about these models? Assimilationism, multiculturalism? Yeah, no, more or less? Some of you can be brave enough to describe one of the models? Or if I say, for instance, assimilation, sorry. What do you prefer?
Well, we kind of got taught this on the first day, so sorry if it's a very blurry, but assimilationism, it's not about accepting someone into your country, for example, with their culture, their identity, but making them change their identity to fit yours, the one in your country, for example. Like, if someone moves to Spain, instead of letting them keep their identity and their culture, making them assimilate our culture and change their identity to fit ours.
Yeah, more or less, you agree? That's important because we are talking about adjust to a culture, adjust to identity, but we don't know exactly what a culture and identity is. Meaning someone who arrived to Spain and loves tortilla is a person who is really well integrated. This is the things that they need, yes or no. This is why when you put the things in a paper, sounds super nice, but then go to the point. What we are talking about? Which is the idea that we are talking when you say that we assimilate. So this is interesting because we are going to talk about that. If I talk about assimilationism, which country do you think? France, maybe not the people of France. Okay, France has the well-known fame of being the country in which assimilationism was born. I'm going to explain why.
For me, United Kingdom.
Okay, no, and I'm going to explain why. Don't worry, it's not a test. But we are going to talk about also how we sometimes say things that are not the same things, okay? But in any case, assimilationism was born in France. But if you think, for instance, you are coming from Germany, Italy, and Spain, no? Mainly, most of you. If you describe your countries, do you think that are assimilationist or no? Do you think that people can live there? No, are not assimilationists. Okay, no, don't answer that. We learn about the models and then you decide which is the one that fits better to your country, okay? So the idea is that there is someone from France here that wants to defend So the model of assimilationism that was really created in France after the revolution, it's a model that now we feel that doesn't fit with our reality, but was not born with the idea of discriminate people by itself, okay? The idea is that if we are a community of a nation in which all people has to have rights, droits de l'homme, this is a question that we can open also, de l'homme, but in any case, rights for everyone, we need to treat people equally, no? So, if people try to become and behave more similarly, it's going to be easy for us to give them the same opportunities, the same situations, yeah? So, in fact, when the idea was created, it was not very controversial in terms of understanding what we say. The idea is that we have some elements that distinguish peoples one from another, and we need to reduce these differences as much as possible in order to treat all the people differently, okay? So, for instance, if I have a language that it's not French, the best way that I can do to participate and have a life that it's similar to other people in the country is learning the language and speak the language, yeah? Seems clear. But then there is questions, and there is marks, and there is specificities that you cannot change in the same way, or change or learn in the same way that learning a language. For instance, things that you cannot change. Sorry, things that you don't want to change. For instance, your cultural expressions or your traditions. It's something that you cannot change, the color of your skin. There are elements that you cannot change, okay? So, how you can be part of a community that always and all the time remembers you that you are part of a minority and that you are not as equal as us, seeing us, this imaginary idea that we have. It's clear what I'm trying to say? That the idea, from the beginning, it was not a bad idea in terms of theoretical approach, but in the daily basis, it's super complicated to fit in all the elements. Because if policymakers are white, male, heterosexual, that is the phrase that we love now, there's a lot of people who doesn't fit in this description, no? For instance, all of you figures for age. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes some of the elements that we mark and we try to distinguish are easy to change or modify, and others no. And then, if we don't manage that correctly, we can create discrimination. That it's something that has been happening in the countries that use assimilationism as a model in the last years, okay? The idea of the multiculturalism, that please don't mix with multicultural. Multicultural is an adjective to show a reality. Multiculturalism is a way to manage diversity. It's different. And it's why I'm saying that the UK was an example of that. I don't know if you can describe multiculturalism, but the multiculturalism system says, okay, we understand that there are people from different backgrounds, from different realities, and the idea that we want is that they can express and they can share what they have in a moment without limits and without any kind of discrimination. Yeah? I'm saying that this is what they say. And this is also interesting because it's also coming from the history. You know that the United Kingdom was one of the big empires in the world. So being British national was something that happens in a lot of people from a lot of parts of the world with different accents, with different ways to talk English, and this is something that is in the root of this multiculturalism idea. But then it's true that at some point, now, if we have been listening to the Brexit discussions or what the British National Party says, it's true that they think that they are multiculturalist as a society, but there's people that is assimilationist. I'm not meaning that at some point there is these nativist parties that say, yeah, but who are British, real British, is us.
But my point with the United Kingdom is also I think that I need some kind of like a historical context, because if we talk about multiculturalism and assimilationism now, it's different if we talk about those topics back in times. So this is something that I really need to understand all the...
No, but this is why it's important to understand where we're coming from. Because do you think that you have, meaning it's something that happens when you are young, that you think that all the things that happen to you are new. But you are part of a cultural background. You are the victims of a lot of information that has been shared with you. Some of this information you know. Some of this information is something that you have listened and never checked if it's true or no. But where we are coming from, these models, these traditional models, have marked how we live today. And have marked how, it's clear what I'm trying to say, that it's, for sure this is our models. And there is a lot of elements that could be removed, and it's not the same, the United Kingdom in the 60s than today, for sure. But the idea that has in mind, and the idea that it's present in the normative and in the legislation in the country is that, for instance, you need to take that into consideration.
The application could be different from, like, I pretend to be multiculturalism and then I just play assimilationist. I'm thinking about sometimes Nigeria situation, that you have different states and different kingdoms, and then the British arrived and they put everything all together. But it's not multicultural, it's just like you have to be on our colony and you have to act like us.
But it happens or it happens?
It happens.
So
yeah.
What means that? That at the end there is some countries in this moment in the world that has been trying to fit an idea of diversity that it's not their own idea, but it's the idea that has been created for the power. Because at the end, what we are talking here is about power relations, okay? So, who has the power has the opportunity to define and to create and to impose, and you can impose nicely, or you can impose heavily by word. Meaning, the idea is that how we think, it's part of all the elements that has happened before us. Because we arrive here and we decide today that people cannot be treated inequally because specific human body traits after a long battle of recognition of these elements. It's clear that this is part of the process. So it's important that we understand how people think and how people try to organize society in order to decide if we are going to change things or no. Yeah? It's okay, it's everything, because I don't know if you are boring or no. It's me, sorry, boring, no. Bored, that it's different. Boring, it's me. Bored, it's you. It's okay or no? We are going okay or no? Because if not, meaning... So what I'm trying to say with that is that at some point we live in a world in which a lot of things happen and it's like super surprising. If you see this image, I don't know if you can see correctly, but this is the census of the 2001 in UK. 2011, it's more interesting, but I put that because it's clear in terms of reading. And it's something that shocks you. This is something that all the people who live in the UK has to fulfill. So, it's something that surprised you, or meaning if you have the same problem that I have, that it's like cannot read from long, you can come here and check. This is how public policies work in UK, meaning this is an element that it's taken into consideration in order to provide public services.
Something that is really interesting is that they only go by the color of your skin. That is the only thing that they are asking, basically.
But it's super surprising because they mix color of skin with nationality. It seems that it's impossible that if you are Irish, you are black. You cannot be black. Because if you are Irish, you are white. It's like, sorry? There's like, sorry? And then you put, so there is some nationalities, but then there's continental situations, no? Caribbean. The people of the Caribbean, all the people of the Caribbean, it's all together, all the same. For sure, because you know that the Caribbean is super small. Africa, meaning the small continent. Please.
About this topic, once I watched a video about an experiment that took place, like, I think in England. They took people from different nationality, so from different countries, and they asked them in which ethnic group they were belonging, and like, for example, there were Italian people that were convinced to be 100% Italian, and then it came out from the experiment that they were, like, for example, half Asian or half African. So they were totally surprised, and it really makes think, I believe that, like, I was surprised too, because you are totally convinced to belong somewhere. Instead, your background, like, you can never know totally your background.
And it's also interesting, sorry.
You can look on this online. You can check DNA test. I saw the same. It's really.
It's funny. For me, the interesting thing is that people are surprised that they are, meaning people. You know the story of the wall?
Maybe I'm interpreting it too much, but the order how white people are on top, and then it is going. I mean, it is showing. Maybe I'm interpreting it too much, but it is showing how the races and the color of your skin is treated in order on the thing. But it's pretty racist, to be honest.
But this is the public policy, and we know that the UK is also famous for having a lot of anti-racist policies. So it's interesting to see that we are fighting, but we are remarking that. How many of you have been in the United States at some point, or you Canada? No, United States. You, when you go to the Sorry. No, but in the United States, when you arrive and you ask for the visa, they ask you to identify yourself in a group. Okay? You have to make a cross. Maybe it doesn't happen now with the new, but the first time that I was in the United States, I have to write that in a paper. And I put Mediterranean, because I thought it was nice. I was coming from the Mediterranean, and I said I was Mediterranean, so I put Mediterranean. And the police officer said me that this was not the check for me, because it was about the color of my skin. And I say, you don't ask that, you put Mediterranean. So Mediterranean is a region, so I come from the region. So for me, it was supernatural that I have to put that and not Caucasian. That is something that it's something that is super far away from me. Why I'm trying to say with that this is things that you seem that are not important, but are sending messages all the time to all the people, okay? And for instance, you put Asian British before that African British. I don't think that it's a casualty, this is my opinion. And you see they put E in Chinese people, because China we know that it's not Asia. Why happens that? Because when they start doing that, the Chinese community in UK was not so important like now. So they put the traditional Asian that were coming to the United Kingdom that are the former colonies, okay? So it's interesting to check these things because you learn a lot about this kind of elements. So what I'm saying is this is something that we know that has been failing. This is a video that I think that we don't have time enough to put, but in any case, I'm going to send you if you want, that it's a moment in which Cameron, the former UK minister, says that the multiculturalism was failed. And it's interesting to recognize that the failure of the system is not because the system was creating inequalities or discrimination, but the failure of the system was because people doesn't integrate. So at the end, we are having the same idea of who are us and who we became. So don't worry that we are arriving to what the problem with these systems that we have been talking about is that, and this is why we call that they are failed, is that we are facing that these models, these traditional models, creates discrimination, creates fragmentation, and creates homogenization, or the risk of homogenization. It means that these systems are not systems that are talking to the people, are systems that are trying to say to the people how they have to behave or how they have to be, or if not, they are going to create this kind of inequalities, okay? So the idea of interculturalism comes from here and tries to learn about the former models in order to create a new way to approach to this idea of living together in a democratic society, okay? So which are the elements? First, and crucial, equality. Equality means equality. And today, equality also should mean equity. Okay, so we're also talking about inequalities. What I'm saying with that is that equality could be a very easy word, but there is a wall beyond that. Anti-discrimination policies are because we think and we are absolutely believe that people are equal. Yeah? So equality, it's one of the main the cornerstones of the system, and it's coming in fact from the idea of the French model of the assimilationism. We are talking about that, is the idea of equality, but in order to create this real equality. Then what we have? Diversity. The idea that people is diverse, it has different identities, that the identities can mix, can be created, that can move differently from people to people, and they need to be respected and recognized, okay? But, and this is the important element of the intercultural approach, is that we are promoting positive interaction. Why? Because you have been saying that at the very beginning of the session, in order to build together something, okay? Have no sense to create these societies in which people live apart, that they have their own traditions, their own elements, but we don't share nothing, because then the cake doesn't work correctly, okay? So what is the main point is, through the respect of the people in terms of understanding diversities and having this idea of the equality or the equal treatment as a element, crucial element, we need to create positive interaction between people, okay? It's clear what is the, because this is a model that it's a process in construction, meaning it's a building process.
What I fail to understand is how can they actually achieve this? Because everyone has its own thinking of diversity, it's their own positive interaction. There's something that is positive for one, for example, in China and Asia, if you make noises while you eat, it is perceived as something good. But if you would do it here, everyone look at you funny because it is not accepted here. So how is it possible that everyone can be on the same page?
Wow, because this is the question. And this is the real question, meaning how we can put all this that in the theoretical framework looks super nice, that I think that more or less all of us can see that we share, no, these goals, but how we do that? And meaning you are talking about a conversation that you can have with a person saying, sorry, can we talk about the noises during lunch and arrive or no to a consensus or no? Meaning, but imagine to do that in a community, in terms of, for instance, a municipality. How we do that? What do you think? How we do that?
I think through education. It's like if you know that is not like if you make noise. If I'm used to make noise because they told me that making noise while I'm eating is a good sign of appreciation, and everybody knows that I'm doing this because of this. They can understand it's not just it's making noise because it's hurting me or it's annoying me. So by knowledge, by knowing the other, by getting like more deep in the conversation, you can try to recognize and respect the diversity and meanwhile intertwine, have a positive interaction.
Super interesting, but that means a lot of work. Eh? Yes. Because imagine what we are saying. We are saying that we need to sit and talk with a lot of people to decide and to share an agreement at the end. So one of the things that interculturalism does is promote dialogue. It's promote participation in order to create spaces in which we can build something together that doesn't create these elements of discrimination or these problems of confrontation. We have no time because I think that we need, but I'm going to, because I think that there is something important that we need to understand when we talk about these questions, and having this slide as the end, I think it's okay, because the challenge that you have, meaning you because you are younger than me, but in fact the challenge that we have as a society is to try to transform that in real politics, in real behaviors of the people. So that means that we need to talk with the people, we need to educate the people in the terms of understanding, but we also need to answer questions that are very uncomfortable. And sometimes the questions, and this is important to understand, that interculturalism doesn't have a recipe for every problem that we have. There is no, the intercultural answer is that. No, the intercultural answer is the one that fits with these three elements. But we need to talk and we need to see that no one feels discriminated if we decide to create or no an element. That means having a lot of information, and this is when intersectionality plays this crucial role. Because you need to understand that all the people has a lot of elements that could be part. And that, for instance, one of the challenges that we also face is who is going to be listened. You know that be part of a public process is not something simple. Not all the people has the same opportunities to reach the municipality or the public administration. Yeah? So how you reach people who is difficult to reach? Or how you try to break the inequalities that creates a lot of problems from for a lot of citizens?
The law, because the law is binding to everyone and does not I mean, it is a method to force anyone to do specifically as they are told. But in France, for example, it can be misused as well to go against this intercultural, to go against this interculturalism.
I think that the law is important, and we need to have this idea on our hands and our minds, but the law in itself is not enough. Because the law itself, and this is, for instance, what is happening in France now, we're facing a country in which the decision of how people can live their religion in a like country is against the right of young girls to go to school. We're talking about big wars here. The right to schooling is something that has been historically a battle. It's in the Human Rights Declaration. It's something that it's so huge. Then we are facing a lot of challenge now. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with the law thing, but it's also more complicated than that. As you already said, the law is not enough, but it's also about the fact that it's very difficult to define everything to make a law that can really protect people. And for example, we have hate speech and hate crime laws, but it's very, very hard to define who can put themselves behind those laws and like, no, I got hate crimes and maybe they didn't, or normally they do, or sometimes people do get hate crimes and it's always like, oh, but are you sure he got attacked because of this part of his identity, or did they just insult him because they wanted to? We've had a lot of cases like this. It's also very difficult to draw the line between protecting someone and taking away people's right to free speech. It's something that it's we're constantly changing this, and it's just very difficult to define all of these things. So yeah, the law is not enough, because yes, you can do a law for this, but it's not going to work every single time.
So we can agree that the law is important, that the law is necessary, but we also need other instruments, dialogue, and trying to see how we can.
So the question was about promoting dialogue, and I think, so about the law, I'm not agreeing with that, because I think that people see their freedom taken away, and so if they are already conservative with the law that comes from the upper side of the state, they are getting only more defensive about that, and so they are not open to have a dialogue with someone. And I think that it's better if the people have an open mind from when they are younger. So, for example, from school, if they have this kind of conversation about promoting dialogue and talking with a lot of people from everywhere in the world, it's better than having a law from after it comes down.
We're going. I think that it's very interesting because that means that we need to work in the future, meaning in the next generation people. But as we also need to deal with what happens now, we also need to find ways to solve what happened about conservative. And today's world, it's a more complicated world than before. You are living in situation, meaning in a lot of things the world is better, for sure. But in a lot of things you are facing things that for us, for me, for instance, that I'm a bit more older than you, but not so much, but in fact are super different. For instance, the red crosses that we have crossed in talking about human rights, or for instance, the spread of hate speeches with a natural and normality that was not the normal thing in other topic, in other years ago, okay? I need to close, sorry. So what I'm trying to say is that in order to try to reach this intercultural future, we have a lot of work to do, and I'm just saying that you are part of this work, so please go and spread the word. Thank you very much.